All right, let's dive into one of evolution's coolest puzzles. Seriously, it's a story about life's hidden connections, and the clues are right there in front of us, literally in the bones of the animals all around us.
Okay, think about this for a second. You've got a human arm, a whale's flipper, and a bat's wing. On the surface, they couldn't be more different, right? One is for grabbing stuff, one's for swimming, and one's for flying. But what if I told you they're hiding a secret? Are they really all that different deep down? That's what we're going to find out. So our first major clue in this whole evolutionary mystery is something that's basically like a family resemblance. A trait that's been passed down through the generations for millions and millions of years. This gets us to a really core idea in biology. And that idea is called homologous structures. The easiest way to think about it is like this. Imagine an architect creates one amazing blueprint. Then that same blueprint is used to build a house, a library, and a train station. The buildings all do totally different things, but their core structure, their framework, is the same. Why? Because they all came from that same original plan. So, just to nail it down, homologous structures have a similar internal layout, they come from a common ancestor, but they might be used for totally different jobs. And that first point, that similar internal structure, that's the smoking gun. It's the dead giveaway that links animals you'd never think were related. Let's start with us. Look at your own arm. Inside, you've got one big bone up top, the humerus, then two bones in your forearm, the radius and ulna, and then a bunch of smaller bones for your wrist and hand. Got it? One bone, two bones, lots of little bones. Remember that pattern. Now this is where it gets cool. Take a look at a bat's wing. Yeah, it's this thin, papery thing used for flying. But if you look at the skeleton inside, would you believe it? It's the exact same pattern. One upper bone, two forearm bones, and then a bunch of super long, thin finger bones that make up the wing. Same blueprint, totally different job. And the pattern just keeps going. Check out a whale's flipper. I mean, it looks like a paddle, nothing like our arm. But inside, you guessed it, there's a humerus, a radius, and an ulna. The bones are shorter and thicker, shaped for pushing through water, but that fundamental layout is identical. It's amazing. So this isn't just some crazy coincidence. It's hard evidence for something called divergent evolution. The idea is that some ancient creature had a limb with this specific bone pattern, and over time its descendants spread out and adapted to all sorts of different lifestyles. Some started climbing, some started flying, others went back to the sea. They all diverged, but they never lost that original family blueprint they inherited. Okay, so if homologous structures are the family, then our next clue introduces us to let's call them the imposters. These are cases where nature looks like it's copying, but it's actually coming up with the same idea from scratch. And these are called analogous structures. And it's pretty much the complete opposite of what we just talked about. Here, you've got totally different blueprints, completely separate origins, but they end up making parts that do the exact same thing. It's kind of like two inventors on opposite sides of the planet who've never met, both inventing a hammer. The problem was how to hit a nail, and they both arrived at a similar-looking solution. The absolute classic example of this, a bird's wing and a butterfly's wing. What do? They both fly. They look kind of similar. They're both flat, wide surfaces that generate lift. But that's where the similarity ends. Because the moment you look inside, the difference is just massive. A bird's wing, as we know, is built on that homologous bone structure. It's a modified arm. But a butterfly's wing? It's made out of a tough, flexible material called chitin. There are no bones at all. They are built from completely different parts and have totally separate evolutionary stories. So what's happening here? This is a perfect example of convergent evolution. It's this idea that the environment itself puts pressure on living things. The problem was, how do I move through the air? And two completely unrelated groups, birds and insects, independently converged on the same answer, wings. It's just an incredible example of how nature solves problems. All right, we've got our two big clues now. We've got the family members, the homologous structures, and we've got the imposters, the analogous ones. So let's put them side by side in a proper head-to-head showdown, just to make it all super clear. This little chart just lays it all out perfectly. For homologous structures, it's all about that shared family history, so the internal structure is the same, even if the function is different. For analogous structures, it's all about solving the same problem. So the function is the same, but the internal structure is totally different because they're not closely related. This is the ultimate cheat sheet. So, we've collected the evidence, we've compared the clues, now we can finally get to the big payoff. What does all of this actually tell us about the huge, sprawling story of life on Earth? Why does it even matter that we can tell these things apart? Well, it matters a whole lot because each one tells us a different but equally important part of the story. Homologous structures are like the branches of a family tree. They let us trace relationships back through time and prove that things like whales and bats are actually distant cousins. Analogous structures, on the other hand, show us the raw power of the environment to shape life, pushing different species toward the same solutions. So let's just boil it all down. What are the big takeaways? Homologous means you share an ancestor. Analogous means you share a problem. The big clue is always in the bones, or the lack of them. And when you put them together, you get these two incredible, powerful lines of evidence for how evolution actually works. And that kind of leaves us with one last really big idea to chew on. If the pressures of an environment can lead totally unrelated creatures to independently invent something like a wing or a flipper, what does that say about the future? As our world keeps changing, what incredible new solutions is life going to converge on next? It's a pretty wild thought.